The water reached her chest before she stopped moving. Petty Officer First Class Renata Vashin held her breath and listened to the delta. Somewhere ahead, past the wall of mangroves and through 200 meters of black water, 12 armed contractors guarded a man who had sold enough weapons to destabilize 3 governments. Somewhere behind her, her teammates moved through the same swamp, and at least one of them wanted her dead more than he wanted the mission to succeed. She adjusted the rifle above her head, keeping the suppressor clear of the waterline. 3 years of proving herself. 3 years of being the first woman to earn the trident and then the sniper tab. 3 years of silence, while men like Senior Chief Hargrave whispered that she had spread her legs through selection instead of earning it with sweat and blood and the kind of patience that only hunters understood. The Delta did not care about any of that. The Delta only cared about movement, about sound, about the weight of a body in water that had swallowed better operators than her. As we begin this journey, tell us where in the world you are watching from. Perhaps military families are common in your area. Renata pressed forward. The mud beneath her boots shifted with each step, threatening to pull her down into the kind of darkness that did not let go. She had grown up in water like this, back in a Louisiana bayou where her grandfather had taught her to hunt alligators before she could drive a car. He had pressed his old brass compass in her palm the day she left for boot camp and told her that patience was the only weapon that never jammed. She felt that compass now against her chest, wrapped in waterproof plastic, beating like a second heart. The comms crackled once. Lieutenant Commander Adeyemi's voice came through low and distorted. Vashin, position check. Renata keyed her mic twice. 2 clicks for on schedule. Words were dangerous out here, where sound carried across water like a scream across an empty room. Another voice cut through. Senior Chief Hargrave, his tone carrying that particular edge he reserved only for her. Try not to get another spotter killed out here. Vashin, some of us actually want to go home. She did not respond. She had learned that responding only gave him ammunition, only let him twist her words into evidence of emotional instability, of weakness, of everything he already believed about women in the teams. Instead, she focused on the next step, and the next, and the water that wanted to pull her rifle down into the murk. The mangroves thickened ahead. She could see the slight elevation of the island where Zelenko had built his compound, a shadow against the darker shadow of the tree line. 48 hours of crawling through this swamp to reach a position that would give her one clean shot. 48 hours of Hargrave at her back. Her grandfather had once told her about hunting a bull gator that had killed 3 of his dogs. He had tracked it for 6 days through water, just like this, sleeping in trees, eating nothing but what he could catch with his hands. On the 7th day, he had found it sunning on a mud bank. 1 shot, 1 kill, patience rewarded. Renata intended to honor that lesson. The water level dropped slightly as she approached the first of the mangrove roots. She allowed herself a single breath of relief before she saw the ripple. Something was moving through the water toward her. Something large. She froze. In the delta, freezing was survival. Movement attracted predators, and out here, the predators came in 2 varieties, the kind with scales and the kind with rifles. The ripple continued, a shaped wake cutting through the black water maybe 30 meters to her left. Crocodile. Salt water by the size of the wake. 12 feet at least. Renata calculated angles. The croc was moving perpendicular to her position, probably tracking something else. If she stayed still, if she controlled her breathing, if she did not let fear turn her into prey, it would pass. The seconds stretched. The wake continued. She could see the eyes now, 2 bumps breaking the surface, reflecting what little moonlight penetrated the canopy. Her fingers stayed off the trigger. A shot now would compromise the entire mission, bring every contractor on that island running. 1 woman against 12 armed men was not a fight. It was a funeral. The crocodile passed. The wake faded. Renata allowed herself to breathe. She keyed her mic once. 1 click for all clear. Adeyemi's response came immediately. Proceed to Rally Point Alpha. Maintain radio silence until position confirmed. She pushed forward through the roots. The mangroves created a maze of twisted wood and hanging vines, every surface slick with moisture and crawling with things she could not see. She moved by feel, by instinct, by the internal compass her grandfather had installed in her long before the Navy had tried. The rally point was a small mud bank barely above the waterline, hidden by a curtain of vegetation. Renata pulled herself onto it and began the process of checking her equipment. Rifle first. The suppressed rifle was her lifeline, a custom piece she had qualified with until she could put 10 rounds through the same hole at 800 meters. She removed the scope covers and pressed her eye to the glass. Nothing. The reticle was gone. The zero was completely off. Renata felt her stomach drop. She checked again, adjusting the focus, looking for any sign that the scope was functional. But she knew this feeling. She knew what sabotage looked like. Someone had tampered with her rifle. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was 2 kilometers into hostile territory, 48 hours from extraction, with a weapon that could not hit a target past 50 meters. Whoever had done this had done it after her final equipment check, which meant it was someone on her team. She thought about the way Hargrave had smiled at her before insertion, the way he had volunteered to inspect the boats while she ran through her pre-mission checklist, the way he had been alone with her equipment for exactly 6 minutes. 6 minutes was enough time to destroy scope. The comms crackled again. Quiroga this time, the youngest member of the team. His voice was tight with controlled fear. I have movement in my sector. Possible hostile patrol. Silence on the line. Then Adeyemi. All units hold position. Quiroga, report when clear. Renata stared at her useless rifle. She had backup iron sights, but iron sights at the distance she needed might as well be throwing rocks. The mission parameters called for a precision shot at over 700 meters. Without the scope, she could not guarantee that shot, which meant the mission was compromised, which meant she would have to explain to Adeyemi that her equipment had failed, which meant Hargrave would shake his head sadly and talk about how he had warned everyone, how women did not have the attention to detail required for special operations, how she had probably damaged her own scope through carelessness. She could already hear the investigation, the career-ending findings, the quiet discharge and the loud silence from everyone she had served with. Or she could adapt. Renata began disassembling the scope with practiced fingers. She had rebuilt this rifle in complete darkness, underwater, in a sandstorm outside Fallujah. She knew every component by touch. If Hargrave had simply knocked the zero off, she could recalibrate. If he had damaged the internal mechanics, she would need to improvise. The internals were intact. He had been smart about it, adjusting the turrets to their maximum offset where a casual check would not notice. A less experienced sniper might have assumed the scope was destroyed. Renata was not a less experienced sniper. She began the painstaking process of resetting the zero by feel, using the distant lights of the compound as a reference point. It would not be perfect. It would not be what she had trained for, but it would be functional. The swamp sound surrounded her as she worked. Insects screaming their mating calls. Something large moving through the water to the south. The distant thump of a generator from the compound that would be her target. 40 minutes later, she keyed her mic twice. On schedule. Functional. Ready to kill. The water beside the mud bank rippled. Renata's hand moved to her sidearm before she recognized the shape pulling itself onto the bank. Quiroga. His young face was streaked with mud and something that might have been tears or might have been sweat. He crawled close enough to whisper. Someone messed with my nods. Night vision is completely shot. He paused. Yours too? Renata looked at him for a long moment. Quiroga had never treated her differently. He asked her advice on shot placement, shared his rations without making it weird, watched her back without being asked. She made a decision that would either save them both or destroy them both. My scope, she whispered back. Someone adjusted it to max offset. Quiroga's eyes went wide. His jaw tightened. He did not ask who. He did not need to. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. Backup rangefinder. The senior chief does not know I carry it. His voice was barely audible. I figured if my nods went down, I would need something. Renata took the rangefinder. It was older tech, bulky and limited, but it would give her distance readings she could trust. Combined with her recalibrated scope, it might be enough. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Quiroga met her eyes. "Because my sister wants to be a SEAL someday, and I want her to have someone to look up to besides a bunch of guys who think she cannot hack it." The words hit Renata somewhere deep. She nodded once. "Then let us give her something to look up to." They heard the sound at the same time. A splash too heavy to be wildlife. A pattern too regular to be natural. Someone was coming through the swamp toward their position. And from the direction, it was not friendly. Renata raised her rifle and sighted through the recalibrated scope. The compound lights gave her just enough illumination to see the shapes moving through the water. For men, tactical formation, heading directly for the rally point. Either their insertion had been compromised, or someone had given away their position. She thought about Hargrave and his 6 minutes alone with the communications equipment. The enemy patrol was 200 meters out and closing. Renata pressed Quiroga down into the mud with one hand and brought her rifle up with the other. The patrol was moving in a standard sweep pattern, 2 men forward and 2 covering, their weapons sweeping the tree line in disciplined arcs. Professional, military trained, not the local muscle Zelenko usually hired. She calculated options in the space between heartbeats. 4 targets, 2 shooters on her side, suppressed weapons that would still echo across water. A compound full of reinforcements less than a kilometer away. The math did not work. She touched Quiroga's shoulder and pointed down, into the water, under the root system. He understood immediately, sliding off the mud bank without a splash and disappearing beneath the black surface. Renata followed, pulling herself under a twisted mangrove root, feeling the water close over her head like a burial shroud. The darkness was absolute. She could feel Quiroga beside her, his body pressed against the root system, both of them holding their breath while boots splashed through the water above. Voices, speaking Russian. One of them laughed at something, and another told him to shut up. Renata counted seconds. Her lungs burned. 30 seconds. 45. A minute. The splashing moved past. The voices faded. She surfaced slowly, letting just her nose and eyes break the waterline. The patrol was moving north, away from their position, sweeping toward where Adeyemi and the others should be. Quiroga came up beside her, gasping quietly. That was not random, he whispered. They knew exactly where to look. Renata nodded. The patrol had come straight for the rally point. Either they had surveillance she had not detected, or someone had told them where to find the team. She keyed her mic 3 times. Emergency signal. Adeyemi needed to know hostiles were heading his direction. The response came in Hargrave's voice instead. All units, rally point compromised. Fall back to secondary position. Vashin, Quiroga, what is your status? Renata hesitated. Hargrave had access to the comms. Hargrave knew the rally point coordinates. Hargrave had been alone with the equipment. Green, she transmitted. Move into secondary. She had no intention of going to the secondary position. Quiroga looked at her with questions in his eyes. She shook her head once and pointed east, away from both the primary and secondary rally points. After a moment, he nodded. He was trusting her with his life, and she felt the weight of that trust like a physical thing. They moved through the swamp in silence, putting distance between themselves and the compromised position. The water grew shallower as they approached higher ground, eventually giving way to mud flats thick with reeds. Renata found a concealed position behind a fallen tree and pulled out the rangefinder Quiroga had given her. Through its limited optics, she could see the compound clearly for the first time. 3 buildings arranged in a triangle pattern. Guard towers at 2 corners. A dock extending into the deeper water where 2 speedboats waited. And there, on the 2nd floor of the main building, a light burning behind curtained windows. Zelenko. She began calculating distances, wind patterns, angles of approach. 730 meters to the main building. Slight crosswind from the southwest. Humidity affecting bullet drop. She would need to be closer. Much closer. The comms crackled. Adeyemi this time. All units report position. Silence. Then Hargrave. Secondary rally point. Holding position. More silence. No response from the other two team members. Adeyemi's voice tightened. Birch, Castellano, report. Nothing. Renata felt cold despite the humid air. Master Chief Birch had been her only ally on the team besides Quiroga, a quiet man who had served 30 years and seen enough to know that competence had no gender. Castellano was a follower, neither hostile nor friendly, just a man doing his job. If the patrol had found them, if they were captured, or worse, the mission was falling apart. Quiroga touched her arm. We need to help them. Renata shook her head. We need to complete the mission. That is what they would want. But the words felt hollow even as she said them. She thought about Birch, the way he had quietly corrected Hargrave's lies without making it obvious. The way he had slipped her extra ammunition before insertion and told her to make every shot count. The way he had looked at her like she was just another operator, nothing more and nothing less. She owed him. She owed him more than she could repay. But she also owed the mission. Zelenko had sold weapons that had killed American soldiers. His death would save lives. Walking away now meant all of this, the sabotage, the patrol, the crawl through hostile water, would mean nothing. I'm going for the shot, she said. You fall back to extraction point Bravo. If I do not make it out, you tell them what happened. You tell them about the scope, about the comms, about all of it. Quiroga's jaw set. I'm not leaving you. That is not a request. I do not care. His voice cracked slightly. My sister. Remember, I'm not going back and telling her I left someone behind because it was easier. Renata looked at this young man, barely 22, covered in swamp mud, carrying equipment that had been sabotaged by his own senior chief. He had every reason to save himself, every excuse to follow orders and let her take the fall. Instead, he was choosing to stand with her. She thought about her grandfather again, about the day he had taken her out on the water after her grandmother died. He had not said much, just sat with her in the boat while the sun went down, letting her know that she was not alone in her grief. Sometimes presence was worth more than words. Okay, she said. Together, they moved toward the compound. The ground grew firmer, the vegetation thicker, providing better concealment but limiting sight lines. Renata found a position on a slight rise, maybe 400 meters from the main building, closer than she wanted to be, close enough that extraction would be complicated if things went wrong. She set up the rifle, adjusting for the new distance, checking her recalibrated scope against the rangefinder readings. The numbers matched within acceptable margins. She would have one shot, maybe two if the guards were slow to react. Quiroga positioned himself to her left, watching their flank with his sidearm drawn. His night vision was useless, but his ears worked fine, and in the Delta, ears mattered more than eyes. The light in Zelenko's window moved. A shadow passed behind the curtain. Renata steadied her breathing, slowed her heart rate, let the world narrow to the space between her eye and the scope. The comms burst to life. Hargrave's voice, loud and wrong somehow. Vashin, I have eyes on you. What the hell are you doing? She did not respond, did not move. The shadow behind the curtain was moving again, approaching the window. Vashin, respond. That is an order. Quiroga looked at her. She shook her head. The curtain moved. A face appeared in the window. Victor Zelenko, arms dealer, mass murderer, looking out at the Delta like he owned it all. Renata put her finger on the trigger. And then the world exploded. The first RPG hit somewhere behind them, close enough to shower them with dirt and debris. The second hit even closer. Renata rolled, pulling Quiroga with her, as the rise they had been using for cover disintegrated under the barrage. Someone had given away their exact position. Someone with access to comms. Someone who was watching them right now. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Hargrave's voice on the radio. Hostiles have engaged Vashin and Quiroga. All units fall back to extraction. Mission is compromised. Repeat, mission is compromised. He sounded almost pleased. Renata grabbed Quiroga and ran. Behind them, the compound was lighting up with activity. Spotlights swept the tree line. Engines roared to life at the dock. She had failed. The mission was gone. And somewhere in the chaos, Hargrave was hunting her. But Renata Vashin had been hunted before. And the Delta was her home territory, whether Hargrave knew it or not. She pulled Quiroga into the deeper water and disappeared into the swamp. The hunt was just beginning. The water swallowed them whole. Renata pulled Quiroga through the mangrove roots, navigating by memory and instinct while searchlights cut patterns through the canopy above. The compound had mobilized faster than she expected. Zelenko's contractors were not amateurs. She found a hollow beneath a massive root system, a pocket of air trapped by the twisted wood, and pulled Quiroga into it. They surfaced in darkness, so complete she could not see her own hands. Quiroga was breathing hard. She could hear the panic building in his lungs, the quick, shallow gasps of a man fighting to control his fear. "Slow," she whispered. "In through your nose. Out through your mouth. We are invisible here." He tried. Failed. Tried again. Gradually his breathing steadied. They sat in the darkness, water up to their chests, listening to the sounds of the hunt. Boat engines growled in the distance. Men shouted in Russian and broken English. A helicopter thumped somewhere to the north, its spotlight turning the swamp into a strobe-lit nightmare. "Hargrave sold us out," Quiroga said. His voice was steady now, cold with the kind of anger that burns slow and long. "Maybe, not maybe. He knew exactly where we were. He called in our position right before those RPGs hit." Renata did not argue. She had reached the same conclusion, but conclusions were not evidence. Hargrave had 20 years of service, commendations, connections. She had 3 years and a dead spotter that half the community blamed her for. She needed proof. The helicopter passed overhead, its rotor wash bending the mangrove branches. Renata pressed herself deeper into the root hollow, feeling the vibration in her chest. If they had thermal imaging, this hiding spot would not last long. But the helicopter moved on. Either they did not have thermal, or the water was masking their heat signatures. Small mercies. "We need to move," Renata said. "Get clear of the search pattern, find high ground, reassess." And then what? Mission is blown. Team is scattered. We have got hostiles everywhere, and our own senior chief trying to get us killed. Then we adapt. She said it like it was simple, like adapting was just another line item on a training checklist. But she had been adapting her entire life. Adapting to a world that told her she could not hunt, could not serve, could not fight. Adapting to men who saw her body before they saw her skills. Adapting to loss and grief, and the particular loneliness of being first in a place where no one wanted her to succeed. This was just one more adaptation. They slipped out of the hollow and moved east, away from the compound, away from the search patterns, toward a section of the delta that even Zelenko's contractors might hesitate to enter. The water grew deeper. The vegetation grew thicker. The sounds of pursuit faded behind them. An hour later, Renata found what she was looking for. A small island, barely 20 meters across, rising from the swamp like the back of a sleeping giant. The vegetation was dense enough to provide concealment, the elevation high enough to give them a view of the surrounding area. She pulled herself on solid ground for the first time in hours and allowed herself a moment of pure physical relief. Her muscles ached. Her skin was raw from hours in the water. The cut on her forearm from the RPG debris had started to throb. Quiroga collapsed beside her, staring up at the canopy. "I thought basic was hard," he said. "I thought Hell Week was the worst thing I would ever experience. This is worse." Renata almost smiled. "Wait until tomorrow." She checked her rifle. The scope was holding its recalibration, but the weapon had taken water during their escape. She began the process of field stripping and cleaning, working by touch in the darkness. Quiroga watched her work. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." He ignored the deflection. "What happened to your last spotter? The one Hargrave keeps bringing up." Renata's hands paused on the rifle bolt. She had known this question would come eventually. Everyone asked eventually. But Quiroga had earned an answer, had proven himself in ways that most operators never would. "His name was Petty Officer Second Class Nolan Hargrave," she said. "The senior chief's nephew." Quiroga went still. "Oh, yeah, oh." She resumed cleaning the rifle, letting the familiar motions carry her through the memory. "We were in country together. Different mission, same theater. Nolan was green, fresh out of sniper school, but he had potential. The senior chief pulled strings to get him assigned to my team. Wanted his nephew to learn from the best shooter in the unit. She paused. The senior chief's words, not mine. What happened? Renata stared at the rifle in her hands. She could still see Nolan's face. Young, eager, terrified in all the ways that young operators were terrified, but would never admit. We were set up on Overwatch. Long mission, 72 hours in position, waiting for a target to show. Third night, Nolan started seeing things. Movement that was not there. Threats that did not exist. He was cracking. She took a breath. I told him to hold it together. Told him we were almost done. But he could not. He broke position. Started moving toward what he thought was an enemy combatant. Quiroga waited. It was a kid. A local kid, maybe 12 years old, out checking animal traps. Nolan had his weapon up. He was on his shoot. Renata closed her eyes. I tackled him. Stopped him from killing a child. But the noise gave away our position. Enemy patrol found us within minutes. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. I got us out, Renata said. Carried Nolan 2 clicks through hostile territory while he was in full mental breakdown. But by the time we reached extraction, he was gone, just staring at nothing. They shipped him home for psych eval. He never recovered. 6 months later, he ate his service weapon. Quiroga exhaled slowly. And Hargrave blames you. Hargrave cannot accept that his nephew was not cut out for this life. So he decided I broke him. That I pushed him too hard, did not support him enough, somehow caused his breakdown instead of prevented it. She snapped the rifle back together with more force than necessary. The official report cleared me. But official reports do not matter when a senior chief with 2 decades of relationships decides you are the enemy. I am sorry, Quiroga said. Do not be sorry. Be ready. Because Hargrave is not going to stop until I am dead or destroyed, and right now he's got the perfect opportunity to make it happen. She finished with the rifle and set it aside. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, the first hints of dawn turning the darkness gray. We have maybe 6 hours until full daylight, she said. I need to sleep for 2 of them. Then we figure out how to salvage this mission. Quiroga sat up. You still want to go after Zelenko. After everything that happened. Zelenko is the mission. The mission does not change because Hargrave is a traitor. But how? We have no team, no support, no extraction plan. Renata lay back on the muddy ground and closed her eyes. We have me. We have you. We have 1 rifle and a man who thinks he has already won. That is not much. It is enough. She let exhaustion pull her down towards sleep, but before she went under, she heard Quiroga shift beside her. Vashin, yeah, when we get out of this, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what Hargrave did. My sister is going to know. The whole damn Navy is going to know. Renata smiled in the darkness. Then we better get out of this. She slept, and in her dreams, her grandfather sat beside her in a boat on still water, saying nothing, asking nothing, just being present while the world fell apart around them. Renata woke to the sound of voices. She was on her feet with the rifle raised before her eyes, fully opened, instinct overriding exhaustion. Quiroga was already awake, pressed flat against the vegetation at the island's edge, peering through a gap in the foliage. He held up 2 fingers, then pointed southwest. Renata moved to his position without a sound. Through the morning haze, she could see a small boat drifting through the channel, maybe 50 meters away. 2 men sat in it, both armed, both wearing the mismatched tactical gear of Zelenko's contractors. They were talking casually, their weapons resting across their laps. Not hunting, patrolling, which meant they did not know about this island yet. The boat drifted closer. One of the men said something in Russian that made the other laugh. They passed within 30 meters of the island's edge, close enough that Renata could see the cigarette dangling from the first man's lips. She held her breath. Quiroga did the same. The boat continued past. The voices faded. The channel fell silent again. Renata exhaled slowly. They are running a search grid. Standard pattern. They will be back in maybe 2 hours. Quiroga nodded. So we move. Not yet. She pulled back from the edge and retrieved her rifle. The scope was holding, the mechanism clean despite the night's abuse. She sighted through it toward the distant compound, now visible in the morning light as a cluster of buildings rising from the delta. Zelenko is still there, she said. I can see movement in the main building. He is not evacuated. Why would he? His men control the delta. He thinks we are either dead or running. Exactly. Quiroga stared at her. You cannot be serious. We barely survived last night. Hargrave is out there somewhere, probably coordinating with these contractors. And you want to go back. I want to finish the mission. The mission is over, Vashin. Command does not even know what is happening out here. For all they know, we are all dead. Renata lowered the rifle. Then we make sure our deaths mean something. She saw the conflict in his face. The training that said follow orders, abort when compromised, survive to fight another day. The instinct that said running was smarter than dying for pride. But she also saw something else. The same fire that had made him refuse to leave her behind. The same stubborn loyalty that had kept him by her side through the night. What is your plan? He asked finally. Renata allowed herself a small smile. Zelenko thinks the threat is neutralized. His men are searching the outer delta, spreading thin. By tonight, security will be at its lowest. They will assume we are either dead or long gone. And Hargrave. Hargrave is a problem. But he is also predictable. He wants me dead, but he wants it to look like enemy action. That means he cannot move against me openly. He has to wait for an opportunity. So we do not give him one. We give him exactly what he expects. 2 operators trying to escape, running for extraction, drawing his attention while I circle back. Quiroga's eyes widened. You want to split up? I want you to make noise. Head toward extraction, point Bravo. Use the radio. Let Hargrave think we are both trying to get out. While you go for Zelenko alone. While I finish the job. Quiroga was quiet for a long moment. The morning sounds of the delta filled the silence. Birds calling, water lapping, the distant buzz of insects waking to the heat. That is suicide, he said. Maybe, probably. But if I make the shot, Zelenko dies. The mission succeeds. And everything Hargrave did to sabotage us becomes irrelevant. And if you do not make the shot, then you get to extraction and you tell them everything. The scope, the comms, all of it. You make sure the truth gets out. Quiroga shook his head. There has to be another way. There is not. Renata's voice was flat. Hargrave has spent 20 years building relationships in the teams. I have spent 3 years being tolerated. If we both go down, his version of events becomes the official record. I will be the operator who got her spotter killed, and then got herself and her partner killed on a botched mission. He will be the senior chief who tried to warn everyone. She met his eyes. I am not letting that happen. Not to me. Not to you. And not to your sister. The words landed hard. Quiroga's jaw tightened. The comms crackled before he could respond. Adeyemi's voice, distorted but recognizable. All units, this is actual. We have received word that the mission is scrubbed. All operators proceed to emergency extraction coordinates. Acknowledge. Renata and Quiroga exchanged glances. Vashin, Quiroga, if you can hear this, respond. We are pulling out. She keyed her mic actual. This is Vashin. What is the situation with Birch and Castellano? Static. Then Adeyemi's voice, heavier than before. Castellano made it to extraction. Birch did not. The words hit Renata like a physical blow. Master Chief Birch. 30 years of service. The quiet man who had slipped her extra ammunition and told her to make every shot count. Gone. What happened? She asked. Enemy patrol. Hargrave says Birch drew fire to let Castellano escape. Renata closed her eyes. Of course that was the story. Birch dies a hero, and there is no one left to contradict whatever Hargrave wants to claim happened. Copy that actual. We are moving to extraction. She released the mic and looked at Quiroga. His face was pale. Birch, he said. He was the only one besides us who saw through Hargrave. I know. You think Hargrave. She cut him off. I think we need to be very careful about what we say on comms from now on. Quiroga nodded slowly. The same cold anger from the night before was back in his eyes, hardened now by grief. The plan, he said. I'll make noise. You take the shot. We meet at extraction. If I am not there by midnight, you leave without me. Vashin, that is not negotiable. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. She took it. Huya, he said quietly. Huya. They gathered their equipment in silence. Renata checked her rifle one final time, running her fingers over the stock, the trigger, the scope that Hargrave had tried to sabotage. This weapon had been with her through 3 years of proving herself. It had never let her down. She did not intend to let it down either. Quiroga moved to the island's edge, preparing to slip back into the water. He paused and looked back. My sister's name is Elena, he said. If something happens to me, tell her I try to be the kind of brother she deserved. Renata nodded. Tell her yourself. Midnight. Extraction Point Bravo. He smiled just barely, and then he was gone. The water swallowed him without a trace. Renata waited, counted to 60. Then she moved in the opposite direction, toward the compound, toward Zelenko, toward the shot that would justify everything. Behind her, the delta stretched endless and hostile. Somewhere in that maze of water and vegetation, Hargrave was waiting. Let him wait. She had been waiting her whole life for a chance to prove herself. Tonight, one way or another, the waiting would end. The delta wanted her dead. Renata had known that since the moment she slipped into the water. But now, 6 hours into her solo approach, the truth of it pressed against her chest with every breath. The sun had turned the swamp into a furnace. Humidity wrapped around her like a wet blanket, stealing oxygen, sapping strength. The water that had hidden her in darkness now reflected light in blinding patterns that made her eyes ache. Twice she had nearly stumbled into sinkholes that would have swallowed her whole. Once she had come face to face with a snake coiled on a low branch, its scales the same muddy brown as the water, its eyes fixed on her with ancient patience. She had backed away slowly. The snake had let her go. Small mercies. By mid-afternoon, she had covered less than half the distance to the compound. Her body screamed for rest, for food, for anything other than the endless slog through chest-deep water. But rest meant failure. Rest meant Hargrave winning. Rest meant everything she had sacrificed becoming worthless. So she kept moving. The comms had been silent since morning. Quiroga was maintaining radio discipline, which was smart, but the silence gnawed at her. She had sent him into danger as a diversion. If something happened to him, if Hargrave found him first, she would carry that weight forever, just like she carried Nolan. The memory ambushed her without warning. Nolan's face in the darkness, twisted with fear and confusion, his weapon raised toward a child who was just checking traps. The weight of his body as she dragged him through hostile territory, listening to him whisper apologies to people who were not there. She had told Quiroga the official version, the version that made sense, the version that let her sleep at night. But there was more. There was always more. Renata found a partially submerged log and braced herself against it, letting her legs rest while she stayed alert. The compound was maybe 3 kilometers away now. She could see the tops of the guard towers through gaps in the canopy. Her mind drifted back to that night with Nolan, the part she had not told anyone. After she tackled him, after she stopped him from shooting that kid, Nolan had looked at her with something beyond fear. Recognition, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. You know, he had whispered, you know what it is like, the thing inside that wants to break. She had not answered, had not known how to answer, because she did know. Every operator knew. The pressure that built behind your eyes during long missions. The voice that whispered you were not strong enough, not good enough, not human enough to survive what you were being asked to do. The difference was that Renata had learned to silence that voice. Nolan never had. I cannot do this, he had said. I thought I could, but I cannot. Uncle Dex said I had it in me, but I do not. I'm not like you. And then the patrol had found them, and there was no more time for confessions. She had carried him out, had held him together long enough to reach extraction. But something had broken in those final kilometers, something that all the therapists and medications and support systems could not repair. 6 months later, he was gone, and Hargrave had needed someone to blame. Renata pushed off from the log and kept moving. The memory faded, but the weight remained, settling in her bones alongside the exhaustion and the heat and the knowledge that she was probably going to die out here. A sound reached her ears, distant at first, then growing closer. Boat engine, coming from the north. She submerged her chin and pressed against the nearest mangrove roots, making herself small, making herself invisible. The boat appeared around a bend in the channel, moving fast. 2 contractors in the bow, weapons ready. A third figure in the stern, steering. The third figure wore American tactical gear. Renata's breath caught. She knew that silhouette, knew the way he held himself, the particular set of his shoulders, the arrogance in his posture. Hargrave. He was working with him openly now, not even pretending anymore. Whatever story he planned to tell command, it would not include the fact that he had been riding in enemy boats, coordinating the hunt for his own teammates. The boat passed within 40 meters of her position. She could hear Hargrave's voice, giving directions in broken Russian, pointing toward the eastern channels where Quiroga was supposed to be creating his diversion. They were hunting Quiroga. Hargrave was leading them right to him. Renata's hand moved to her rifle. She could take the shot. 40 meters, stationary target against the boat's movement. Hargrave would be dead before he knew what happened. But the contractors would return fire. They would call for reinforcements. The compound would lock down. Zelenko would evacuate. The mission would fail, and Quiroga would still be out there, hunted by men who now had nothing to distract them. She let the boat pass. Let Hargrave disappear around another bend. Let the engine fade into the distance. The hardest shots were the ones he did not take. She keyed her mic, breaking her own radio silence. 2 clicks. Pause. 3 clicks. Pause. 1 click. The pattern meant danger, change of plans, hold position. If Quiroga was listening, he would understand. He would go to ground instead of making noise. He would survive. If he was listening, the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The heat eased slightly, replaced by the thick humidity of approaching evening. Renata pushed forward, eating up the remaining distance with grim determination. By the time the sky turned orange, she had reached the outer perimeter of the compound's security zone. Guard towers loomed ahead. Spotlights waited for darkness. Somewhere inside those walls, Viktor Zelenko was preparing for another night of safety he did not deserve. Renata found her position. A slight rise covered by dense vegetation, 420 meters from the main building. Not ideal, not the shot she had trained for, but possible. She set up the rifle, checked the scope, calculated windage and elevation. Let her breathing slow and her heart rate drop. The light in Zelenko's window came on. She pressed her eye to the scope and waited. The Delta had wanted her dead all day. But Renata Vashin had not come here to die. She had come here to kill. And nightfall was almost here. Darkness fell over the Delta like a hell breath. Renata watched through her scope as the compound transformed. Daytime complacency giving way to nighttime vigilance. Spotlights hummed to life. Guards changed shifts. The boats that had been hunting all day returned to the dock, their crews tired and frustrated. She counted 12 contractors, 2 in each tower, for patrolling the perimeter, for more inside the main building, visible through windows as shadows moving behind curtains. And somewhere out there, Hargrave. She had not seen him return with the boats, which meant he was still in the Delta, still hunting, still a problem she would have to solve. But first, Zelenko. The arms dealer appeared at his window, just after full dark, silhouetted against the interior light like a target on a training range. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at his domain, a man who had never faced real consequence for the suffering he caused. Renata's finger found the trigger. 420 meters. Crosswind at maybe 5 knots. Humidity affecting the round's trajectory. She made the adjustments automatically, years of training compressed in a microseconds of calculation. The shot was there, right there. One pull and Zelenko would cease to exist. But something made her hesitate. A flicker of movement at the edge of her scope. She shifted her aim slightly and felt her stomach drop. Quiroga. He was being dragged toward the main building by 2 contractors, his hands bound behind his back, his face bloody. He was alive but barely. They had found him, caught him. And now they were bringing him to Zelenko like a trophy. The plan had failed. Her diversion had become a prisoner. Renata watched them drag Quiroga through the compound's main gate. Watched them disappear into the building. Watched the door close behind them. She had one bullet that mattered. One shot that would complete the mission. But taking that shot now meant leaving Quiroga to whatever fate Zelenko had planned for captured American operators. The mission or the man. The job or the teammate. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Patience is the only weapon that never jams. Renata lowered the rifle. She needed information. She needed a new plan. And she needed to move before Hargrave found her position. Slipping back into the water felt like defeat, but defeat was temporary. Death was permanent. She circled the compound's perimeter, staying in the deepest shadows, looking for any weakness in Zelenko's defenses. She found on the eastern side a drainage culvert, barely wide enough for a person, emptying swamp water into a channel behind the compound. The grate was rusted, the bars corroded by years of humidity and neglect. Renata tested the bars. They flexed. With enough force, they would break. But entering the compound alone, with one rifle and a sidearm, against 12 armed contractors and whatever security waited inside, was not a plan. It was a death wish. She needed an edge. The comms crackled in her ear. A voice she did not expect. "Vashin, this is Birch. Do you copy?" Renata's heart stopped. Birch was dead. Adeyemi had confirmed it. Hargrave had told the story himself. She keyed her mic. "Birch. They said you were killed." "Negative." A pause, heavy with pain. "Took 2 rounds in the vest. Played dead until the patrol moved on. Been tracking their comms ever since." Relief washed through her, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. "Where are you?" "South side of the compound. Saw them bring in Quiroga. Figured you would not leave him. I cannot take the shot with him inside." "I know. That is why I am here." Birch's voice was strained but steady. 20 years of combat experience compressed into calm professionalism. "I have been monitoring their radio traffic," he said. "Zelenko is planning to interrogate Quiroga at midnight. Wants to know how much we know about his operation, who else is coming, what the extraction plan looks like. That gives us 2 hours. It gives us less than that." Birch paused. "Vashin, there's something else. Hargrave has been talking to Zelenko directly. Cutting deals. He's been feeding them information about the team since before we inserted." Renata closed her eyes. She had suspected. She had known. But hearing it confirmed still felt like a knife between her ribs. "He sold us out," she said. "He sold you out. Specifically." Birch's voice hardened. "I caught fragments of the conversation. Zelenko asked why he was so focused on one operator. Hargrave told him about Nolan. About what really happened." Renata went cold. "What do you mean, what really happened?" The silence stretched. When Birch spoke again, his voice was careful. "Hargrave told Zelenko that you did not just save Nolan that night. He said you told Nolan the truth about himself. Told him he was not cut out for the teams. Told him his uncle had pushed him into something he could not handle." "I never said that." "I know, but Hargrave does not. He thinks you broke his nephew with words, not with what happened after. He has been telling himself that story for 3 years." Renata's mind raced. She remembered Nolan's face in the darkness, the things he had whispered, the confession she had never repeated to anyone. You know what it is like, the thing inside that wants to break. She had not broken Nolan. Nolan had already been broken long before that mission, long before she ever met him. Broken by expectations he could not meet. Broken by an uncle who saw potential that was never there. Broken by the weight of a legacy he had never asked to carry. But Hargrave needed someone to blame. And blaming himself was not an option. "Where is he now?" Renata asked. "Inside the compound. Meeting with Zelenko personally. Probably negotiating his payment for delivering American operators to an arms dealer." "Can you get to the drainage culvert on the east side?" "I can try. Be there in 30 minutes. We go in together, get Quiroga, and then I take my shot." "And Hargrave?" Renata thought about everything the senior chief had done. The sabotaged scope, the leaked position, the dead teammates, and the lies, and the years of persecution built on a foundation of grief and denial. "Hargrave is mine. she said. Copy that. Birch out. The comms went silent. Renata checked her rifle one more time and began moving toward the drainage culvert. The mission had changed. The target had multiplied, but for the first time since insertion, she was not alone. And Hargrave had no idea what was coming. Birch looked worse than he sounded. Renata found him waiting at the drainage culvert, his face gray with pain, his vest stained dark where the rounds had impacted. He was holding his ribs with one hand and his sidearm with the other. You should be at extraction, she said. So should you. He managed a weak smile. Guess we're both bad at following orders. She examined his injuries in the dim light. 2 impacts center mass, stopped by the ceramic plates, but still delivering enough force to crack ribs. Internal bleeding was possible, likely even. Can you move? She asked. I can move enough. That is not what I asked. Birch met her eyes. 30 years in the teams had carved his face into something hard and weathered, but his gaze still held warmth. I am not letting you go in there alone, Vashin. Not after everything Hargrave has done. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that his presence was a liability, that wounded operators got people killed, that she worked better solo. But that was Hargrave's voice in her head, the isolation he had cultivated around her for 3 years. The lie that she had to prove herself alone because no one would stand with her. Birch was standing with her. Wounded, bleeding, probably dying, and still standing. Okay, she said. Together, they approached the culvert. The rusted grate gave way with minimal noise, the corroded bars snapping under Renata's hands. The tunnel beyond was narrow and flooded with 6 inches of stagnant water, but it led directly into the compound. Renata went first. The darkness inside was absolute, the kind of black that pressed against your eyes and made you doubt your own existence. She navigated by touch, her rifle slung across her back, her hands finding the slimy walls and guiding her forward. Behind her, she could hear Birch's labored breathing. Each exhale carried a wet rattle that worried her more than she wanted to admit. The culvert emptied into a drainage basin beneath the main building. A metal ladder led up to a maintenance hatch. Renata tested the rungs, found them solid, and climbed. The hatch opened into a storage room filled with crates. Weapons, ammunition, the tools of Zelenko's trade, stacked floor to ceiling like a monument to human suffering. Birch pulled himself up behind her, his face contorted with the effort. He leaned against a crate and took a moment to breathe. Quiroga will be in the main room, he whispered. That is where Zelenko conducts his business. 2nd floor, east side. And Hargrave. Could be anywhere. Last I heard, he was with Zelenko. Probably still is. Renata checked her rifle. The scope held steady. The chamber was loaded. Everything she needed was right here in her hands. I will get Quiroga, she said. You find a position with sight lines on the main room. When I give a signal, we move. What is the signal? Gunfire. Birch almost laughed, then winced at the pain. Simple. I like it. They moved through the storage room to a door that opened onto a narrow corridor. The compound's interior was utilitarian, concrete walls and fluorescent lights, built for function rather than comfort. Voices echoed from somewhere above, speaking Russian, speaking English, speaking the universal language of men who thought they were untouchable. Renata and Birch split at the first intersection. He went left toward a stairwell that would give him an elevated position. She went right toward the sounds of activity. The corridor led to another door, this one heavier, reinforced. Through it, she could hear Zelenko's voice, smooth and accented, asking questions in the patient tone of a man who had all the time in the world. And then she heard Quiroga scream. The sound cut through her like a blade. Not a scream of fear, but of pain, the kind of sound that came from nerve endings being systematically destroyed. They were torturing him. Right now, right on the other side of this door. Renata's training said wait. Assess. Plan. But her instinct said move. Save him. End this. She kicked the door open. The room beyond was large and open, some kind of operations center converted into an interrogation space. Quiroga was tied to a chair in the center, his face swollen, his fingers bent at wrong angles. Zelenko stood over him with a pair of pliers in his hand. Two contractors flanked the door, weapons coming up as Renata entered. She shot them both before they could aim. 2 rounds, 2 bodies, the suppressed rifle coughing death into the silence. Zelenko dropped the pliers and reached for a pistol on the table. Renata put a round through his shoulder before he could touch it. He spun and fell, screaming in a language she did not understand. The room was clear. Almost. A door on the far side burst open and Hargrave came through, weapon raised, his face twisted with rage and something that might have been satisfaction. "I knew you would come," he said. "I told Zelenko. I told him you were too stupid to run, too stubborn to let your partner die. And here you are, right where I need you." Renata kept her rifle trained on him. Her finger rested on the trigger. One twitch and it would be over. But she did not twitch. "Put it down, Deck," she said. "It is finished." Hargrave laughed. "It is not finished until you are dead. Until the woman who destroyed my nephew is finally held accountable. I did not destroy Nolan. You broke him. You told him he was not good enough. You planted the doubt that ate him alive." Renata shook her head. "He was already broken when I met him. He told me himself. The thing inside that wants to break." Those were his words. He knew he was not ready. He knew you push him into something he could not handle. Hargrave's face contorted. "Shut up. He wanted to be worthy of you. Wanted to make you proud. And when he could not, when he realized he would never be what you needed him to be, it destroyed him. I did not do that, December. You did." The words hit him like physical blows. She could see it in his eyes, the cracks forming in the armor he had built around his guilt. Behind him, through the open door, Renata saw Birch appear in the corridor. Wounded, pale, but his weapon was up and his aim was steady. "It is over," Renata said again. "Put the weapon down." Hargrave's hand trembled. His eyes were wet. For a moment, she thought he might actually surrender. Then his face hardened and he raised his rifle. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Renata's round took Hargrave in the chest. Birch's took him in the back. Senior Chief Declan Hargrave fell to the ground and did not move again. The room went silent except for Koroga's ragged breathing and Zelenko's whimpering. Renata lowered her rifle and went to untie her teammate. "It is over," she said softly. "I have got you. It is over." Quiroga could barely stand. Renata got his arm over her shoulder and took his weight, feeling the tremors running through his body. His hands were ruined, fingers twisted and swollen, but he was alive. That was what mattered. Birch secured Zelenko with zip ties, ignoring the arms dealer's protests and threats. The shoulder wound was bleeding heavily, but not arterially. He would survive long enough to face justice. "We need to move," Birch said. "Gunfire will bring the rest of them." "How many left outside?" 8, maybe more. Birch checked his magazine. "I got 6 rounds. You." Renata did the math. 12 in the rifle, 15 in her sidearm. 27 rounds against 8 trained contractors who knew this compound better than she did. The math still did not work, but it was better than before. "Can you walk?" she asked Quiroga. He nodded weakly. "Just point me in a direction. East. Back through the drainage culvert. Is our only way out that is not covered by guards." They moved as a unit, Renata supporting Quiroga, Birch covering their rear, with Zelenko stumbling ahead of them at gunpoint. The corridor was empty, but she could hear shouting from other parts of the building. The contractors were mobilizing. They reached the storage room, just as boots thundered on the floor above. Someone was barking orders in Russian. Door slammed. The hunt was beginning. Birch went down the maintenance hatch first, dropping into the drainage basin with a grunt of pain. Zelenko followed, prodded by Renata's rifle. Then Quiroga, lowering himself one agonizing rung at a time. Renata went last. She pulled the hatch closed behind her and wedged a broken rifle barrel through the handle. It would not hold forever, but it would slow them down. The culvert stretched ahead, black and flooded. They had maybe 5 minutes before the contractors figured out where they had gone. "Move," Renata said. "Do not stop for anything." They crawled through the darkness. The water was deeper now, chest high in places, and Quiroga struggled to keep his head above the surface. Renata pushed him forward, refusing to let him fall behind. Behind them, she heard the hatch being hammered. Metal screaming against metal. They were out of time. The culvert ended. They emerged into the night air, into the delta, into the maze of water and vegetation that had nearly killed her twice already. But now the delta was not her enemy. Now it was her ally. Which way? Birch gasped. His face was the color of ash. Extraction Point Bravo. North by northwest. Maybe 2 kilometers. I'm not going to make 2 kilometers. Then I will carry you. Birch shook his head. Take Kiroga. Take Zelenko. Get to extraction. I will hold them here. No. Vashin. He grabbed her arm with surprising strength. I have got maybe 30 minutes before these ribs puncture something important. I'm not making it out of this delta no matter what happens. But I could buy you time. I can make sure Kiroga gets home. I can make sure his sister knows her brother is a hero. Renata's throat tightened. She thought about her grandfather, about the day he had gone out on the water and not come back. Heart attack, the doctors said. Died doing what he loved. But she had always wondered if he had known somehow, if he had chosen to meet his end in the place that had defined his life. Birch was choosing too. Tell Command what Hargrave did, she said. Make sure the truth gets out. I recorded everything. His hand went to his vest pocket. Got a chip in here with 3 hours of intercepted comms. Hargrave talking to Zelenko. Coordinates. Deals. Everything. He pressed the chip into her hand. Now go. Before I change my mind and try to be a hero. Renata took the chip. Looked at this man who had quietly supported her for 3 years, who had slipped her extra ammunition and told her to make every shot count, who was now giving his life so that she could finish the mission. Thank you, she said, for everything. Birch smiled. Make it mean something, Vashin. He turned and moved back toward the culvert entrance, positioning himself behind a fallen log with his weapon raised. The first contractors emerged from the drainage pipe seconds later. Birch opened fire. Renata did not look back. She grabbed Kiroga with one hand and Zelenko with the other and pulled them into the swamp. The sounds of gunfire echoed behind them, sharp and rhythmic, each shot buying them another few seconds of distance. They pushed through chest-deep water, through mangrove roots that clawed at their clothes, through darkness so complete that Renata navigated by feel and memory alone. The gunfire behind them slowed, then stopped. Kiroga made a sound that might have been a sob. Renata squeezed his arm and kept moving. 1 kilometer, then another. The delta tried to swallow them with every step, but Renata refused to let it win. She had come too far, lost too much, carried too many people on her back to fail now. The extraction point appeared through the trees like a mirage, a small clearing on the riverbank, a signal beacon blinking in the darkness, and beyond it, the low rumble of an approaching boat. Adeyemi's voice crackled through the comms. Vashin, is that you at Bravo? Affirmative, actual. She could barely speak. I have Kiroga in the primary target, requesting immediate extraction. What about Birch and Hargrave? Renata closed her eyes. Hargrave was a traitor. Birch died getting us out. I have proof of everything. The silence on the line stretched for an eternity. Copy that, Vashin. Extraction inbound. Hold your position. The boat emerged from the darkness, its running lights cutting through the night. Renata let herself sink to her knees in the shallow water. Kiroga collapsed beside her. Even Zelenko had stopped struggling, too exhausted and wounded to resist. They had made it. Against everything, against everyone, they had made it. But the cost. God, the cost. Renata reached into her pocket and touched the chip Birch had given her. 3 hours of evidence. 3 years of vindication. She would make it mean something. She had promised. And Renata Vashin always kept her promises. The forward operating base was chaos when they arrived. Medical teams swarmed the boat before it even touched the dock, pulling Kiroga onto a stretcher, shouting vitals and medication names that blurred together in Renata's exhausted mind. Zelenko was handed off to intelligence officers who looked at him like Christmas had come early. Nobody looked at Renata at all. She sat on the edge of the dock, her feet dangling over the water, and let the adrenaline finally drain from her body. Every muscle ached. Every joint screamed. The cut on her forearm had opened again sometime during the escape, leaving a trail of blood down her hand that she had not even noticed. A medic approached with a kit. She waved him off. "I am fine." "Ma'am, you're bleeding." I said I am fine. He hesitated, then moved on to easier patients. Renata did not blame him. She probably looked like something the Delta had chewed up and spit out. Lieutenant Commander Adeyemi found her an hour later. He looked like he had aged 10 years since insertion, his face drawn tight with stress and something she could not quite identify. "Vashin," he said, "I need your debrief." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the chip. This first. 3 hours of intercepted communications. Hargrave coordinating with Zelenko, selling our positions, arranging the ambush. All of it. Adeyemi took the chip like it was made of glass. He stared at it for a long moment. Birch recorded this. Birch gave his life to get it out. The words hung in the air between them. Adeyemi closed his eyes. "I should have seen it," he said quietly. "Hargrave, the way he talked about you, the things he said when you were not around. I should have known something was wrong. You trusted a senior chief with 20 years of service. That is not a failure. That is how the system is supposed to work. The system failed you." Renata shrugged. "The system is made of people. People fail. What matters is what happens next." Adeyemi looked at her with something new in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition of something he had not seen before. "What happened out there, Vashin?" The full story. So she told him. All of it. The sabotage scope. The leaked coordinates. Birch playing dead in the swamp. Korova's capture. The infiltration. The confrontation with Hargrave. The truth about Nolan that she had carried for 3 years and finally spoken aloud. Adeyemi listened without interruption. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Hargrave's body," he said finally. "We will need to recover it. Good luck. The Delta does not give up its dead easily." In the official report, Renata met his eyes. The official report says that Senior Chief Declan Hargrave was a traitor who sold out his team to an arms dealer. That Master Chief Solomon Birch died a hero. That Petty Officer Quiroga showed courage beyond his years. And that the mission was completed despite enemy action and internal sabotage. Adeyemi nodded slowly. "And you?" "I did my job." She stood up, swaying slightly as her exhausted body protested the movement. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. She had been awake for nearly 40 hours. "I need to see Quiroga," she said, "before they move him. Medical bay." "But Vashin." Adeyemi caught her arm. "You should know. Command is already asking questions. The comms blackout, the mission going sideways, a senior chief dead. There will be an investigation. Let them investigate. The truth is on that ship. The truth does not always matter to people who have already decided what they want to believe." Renata pulled her arm free. "Then I will make them believe. I have been fighting that battle my whole career. One more round is not going to break me." She walked away before he could respond. The base was waking up around her. Personnel moving between buildings, the machinery of military operations grinding forward regardless of what had happened in the Delta. Life continued. The mission continued. Everything continued except for the people who had been lost along the way. The medical bay was quiet. Most of the beds were empty, reserved for casualties that thankfully had not materialized. Quiroga was in the far corner, his hands wrapped in white bandages, and 4 dripping fluids into his arm. His eyes opened when she approached. "Vashin." His voice was hoarse. "They told me we made it. We made it. Birch." She shook her head. "He did not make it, but he made sure we did." Quiroga closed his eyes. Tears leaked from beneath his lids, cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "He saved my life," he said. "Back when they grabbed me. One of Zelenko's guys was going to shoot me right there. Birch came out of nowhere, drew their fire, gave me a chance to run. I thought he was dead then, too. He wanted you to get home. Wanted your sister to know you were a hero. I'm not a hero. I got captured. Got my hands broken. Almost gave up everything." Renata sat on the edge of his bed. "You held out long enough for us to reach you. You did not break. That is the only thing that matters." Quiroga opened his eyes and looked at her. "Why get out of here? I'm going to tell everyone what really happened. What Hargrave did. What you did. All of it. I know. My sister is going to know your name. She is going to know that the first woman to wear the trident saved my life and took down a traitor and completed a mission that should have been impossible. Renata felt something shift in her chest, something that had been wound tight for 3 years, maybe longer, finally beginning to loosen. Just tell her the truth, she said. That is all I have ever wanted. Quiroga reached out with his bandaged hand and touched her arm. The contact was awkward, gentle, human. Thank you, he said, for not leaving me behind. Renata covered his hand with hers. Never. Not ever. She stayed with him until the sedatives pulled him back under. Then she walked outside into the dawn light, feeling the warmth on her face for the first time in what felt like forever. The Delta was behind her now. The investigation was ahead. But somewhere in between, she had found something she had not expected. People who believed her. People who stood with her. People who would carry the truth forward no matter what. That was worth more than any medal they could pin on her chest. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Renata spent most of it in windowless rooms, answering the same questions from different faces. Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Special Operations Command. Intelligence officers whose names she was never given. They picked apart every decision, every shot, every moment of the mission like surgeons dissecting a corpse. She told the truth. Every time. The same story, because it was the only story there was. The chip helped. 3 hours of Hargrave's voice, coordinating with Zelenko, discussing prices for American lives, laughing about how easy it had been to manipulate the mission parameters. The investigators listened to it with expressions that shifted from skepticism to horror to cold fury. Zelenko helped too. The arms dealer had decided that cooperation was his best path to avoiding a black site, and he talked for hours about his arrangement with Hargrave. The money transfers, the encrypted communications, the years of information that Hargrave had been feeding him about SEAL operations in the region. Years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. Renata learned things during the investigation that made her stomach turn. Hargrave had been dirty long before Nolan died. His hatred of her was real, but it was also convenient. A woman to blame. A scapegoat to distract from his own betrayal. She had been his cover story as much as his target. On the 18th day, Castellano came to see her. The operator who had escaped with Birch's help, who had made it to extraction while his teammates fought for their lives. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by guilt. I need to tell you something, he said. She waited. Before insertion. Hargrave pulled me aside, told me to watch you, said you were unstable, that you might compromise the mission, that I should report anything suspicious directly to him. Renata felt nothing. She had suspected as much. I believed him, Castellano continued. 20 years of service. Commendations. Everyone respected him. I thought he was looking out for the team. He was looking out for himself. I know that now. Castellano's voice cracked. I should have seen it. Should have questioned why he was so focused on you. But I just followed orders. That is what he counted on. From all of us. Castellano met her eyes. For what it is worth, I told the investigators everything. What Hargrave said. How he tried to turn the team against you. All of it. It is worth something. Renata allowed herself a small nod. It is worth the truth. He left looking slightly less broken than when he arrived. She hoped it helped him. She hoped it helped all of them. On the 21st day, the investigation concluded. Renata was summoned to a conference room where Admiral Catherine Osei waited with a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. The Admiral was a legend in special operations, one of the first women to reach flag rank in the community, known for her surgical precision in both combat and politics. Petty Officer Vashin, she said. Sit down. Renata sat. I have read every report, listened to every recording, interviewed every surviving member of your team. Admiral Osei opened the folder. Do you know what I found? The truth, hopefully. I found a senior chief who betrayed his oath, his country, and his teammates for money and ego. I found a master chief who gave his life to expose that betrayal. I found a young operator who endured torture rather than compromise his team. And I found you. The Admiral leaned forward. I found an operator who was sabotaged, hunted, and abandoned, who completed her mission anyway, who saved her teammate. who brought home evidence that will dismantle an arms network we have been tracking for years, who did everything right while everything around her went wrong. Renata did not know what to say, so she said nothing. Senior Chief Hargrave's record is being posthumously revised, Admiral Osei continued. His commendations will be revoked. His family will be notified of the true circumstances of his death. His name will be remembered as a cautionary tale, not a hero. And Birch, Master Chief Solomon Birch, will receive the Navy Cross. Posthumously, his family will know exactly what he did and why. Renata felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. Birch deserved that. Deserved more than that, but at least this was something. There is one more matter, Admiral Osei said. She pulled a small box from beneath the folder. Your actions during this mission demonstrated exceptional valor under circumstances that would have broken most operators. Command has approved you for the Silver Star. She slid the box across the table. Renata stared at it. The same medal they had tried to give the man in her grandfather's story. The recognition she had never asked for, never expected, never believed she would receive. I did not do it for a medal, she said. I know. That is why you deserve one. Renata reached out and touched the box. It was lighter than she expected. Such a small thing to represent so much. There is something else, Admiral Osei said. Something not in any official report. Mung. The Admiral's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I read the transcripts of your confrontation with Hargrave. What you said to him about his nephew. About the pressure that broke that young man. Renata tensed. You carried that for 3 years, Admiral Osei continued. The knowledge of what really happened. The guilt that was never yours to carry. And you used it, in the end, to speak truth to a man who had built his entire identity on a lie. She leaned back. That took more courage than any shot you fired. I want you to know that. Whatever else happens, whatever comes next, you should know that someone in command understands what you really accomplished in that room. Renata blinked. Her eyes were burning. She blamed the fluorescent lights. Thank you, Admiral. Do not thank me. Go see your teammate. I understand he is being discharged from medical today. Renata stood, took the box, and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. Admiral, what happens now? To me. Now you heal. You rest. And then, if you want it, you continue being exactly what you have always been. The best sniper in teams. Only this time, everyone will know it. Renata nodded once and left the room. The sun was bright outside, blinding after 3 weeks of windowless interrogations. She stood on the steps of the headquarters building and let the light wash over her face. The weight she had carried for 3 years was not gone. It would never be completely gone, but it was lighter now. Shared, acknowledged. She had told the truth, and the truth had finally set her free. Quiroga was waiting outside the medical building when Renata arrived. He was thinner than before, his face still carrying the shadows of what he had endured, but his eyes were clear. His hands were wrapped in fresh bandages, the fingers splinted and stabilized, already beginning the long process of healing. Beside him stood a young woman who could only be his sister. Elena Quiroga was 19 years old, with her brother's dark eyes and her own fierce energy. She wore a Navy ROTC sweatshirt and stood with the particular posture of someone who had already decided exactly what she was going to do with her life. When she saw Renata approaching, she broke away from her brother and walked straight toward her. Renata stopped. She was not sure what to expect. Anger, maybe. Blame for putting Tomas in danger. Questions she did not know how to answer. Elena stopped 3 feet away and looked her up and down with an assessing gaze that reminded Renata of boot camp instructors. You were smaller than I imagined, Elena said. Renata blinked. Excuse me. Tomas made you sound 10 feet tall. Said you carried him through a swamp while being hunted by an entire private army. Said you took on a traitor and an arms dealer in one. She tilted her head. I expected someone bigger. Behind her, Quiroga was trying very hard not to laugh. Size is not everything, Renata said carefully. Elena's serious expression cracked into a grin. No, I guess it is not. She closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around Renata in a hug that was surprisingly strong. Thank you for saving my brother, for being exactly what he said you were. Renata stood frozen for a moment. Physical affection was not her strong suit. But slowly, awkwardly, she returned the embrace. "He saved himself," she said. "I just helped." Elena pulled back, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He told me everything. About Hargrave, about Birch, about what you said to him in that compound." She shook her head. 3 years of that man trying to destroy you, and you still did your job. Still saved lives. Still came home. That is what we do. No. Elena's voice was firm. That is what you do. And I'm going to remember it. Every day of training. Every time someone tells me I do not belong. I'm going to remember that Petty Officer First Class Renata Vashin walked through hell and came out the other side still standing. Renata did not know what to say. 3 years of fighting alone, of being doubted and dismissed and undermined, and now this girl was looking at her like she was something worth becoming. It was terrifying and wonderful, and more than she had ever expected. Quiroga limped over to join them. His hands were useless for now, but his smile was fully functional. "I told you she was something," he said to his sister. "You undersold her." "I really did not." Renata looked between them. These siblings who had given her something she did not even know she needed. A legacy beyond survival. A reason beyond the mission. "How are the hands?" she asked Quiroga. "Doctors say I will regain about 80% function." He shrugged. "Good enough to hold a weapon. Maybe not good enough for fine surgery. But I was not planning on becoming a doctor anyway." "What about the teams?" Quiroga's expression flickered. "Still being evaluated. Nerve damage is tricky. They will not know for sure until the splints come off." Renata nodded. "Whatever happens, you have a place. You proved yourself out there. Nobody can take that away." He met her eyes. "Neither did you." Finally. The word finally hung between them, carrying the weight of 3 years of doubt and dismissal. 3 years of being told she did not belong, did not deserve her place, had not earned her trident. 3 years of silence in the face of lies. That was over now. "Come on," Elena said, breaking the moment with characteristic energy. "Tomas is being discharged, and I am starving. You are buying us lunch, Petty Officer Vashin. Consider it payment for all the heroics." "I do not think that is how it works." "It is absolutely how it works." Elena grabbed her brother's arm and started walking. "Tomas told me you have not eaten a real meal in 3 weeks. Just investigation room coffee and whatever garbage they serve in the mess. That ends now." Renata found herself following them without conscious decision. The sun was warm on her face. The weight of the metal box in her pocket was a constant reminder of what she had accomplished. But more than that, more than medals or vindication or official recognition, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like she belonged. They found a small restaurant off base, the kind of place that served enormous portions and did not ask questions about bandaged hands or 1,000-yard stares. Elena ordered for all of them, ignoring protests, filling the silence with stories about ROTC training and her plans for the future. "She wants to be a pilot," Quiroga said during a lull. "Fighter jets. She has wanted it since she was 6. "I want to be the first female Blue Angel," Elena corrected. "Go big or go home." Renata smiled. "You will make it." "How do you know?" "Because you are too stubborn to fail." I recognize the type. Elena Grined. Takes one to know one. The food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence. 3 people bound together by circumstances none of them had chosen, but all of them had survived. Halfway through the meal, Quiroga set down his fork and looked at Renata with an expression she could not quite read. "I submitted my recommendation this morning," he said. "Recommendation for what?" "For you. To lead your own team." He smiled at her surprise. Adeyemi signed off on it. So did Admiral Osei. They are fast-tracking it through command. Renata stared at him. A team of her own. The thing she had never dared to want, because wanting it meant admitting it was possible, and for 3 years nothing had seemed possible except survival. "You deserve it," Quiroga said. "More than anyone I know." Elena raised her glass of water. "To the future team leader. May she terrify her operators as much as she terrifies her enemies." They clinked glasses. Renata laughed, the sound strange and unfamiliar in her own ears. For the first time in as long as she could remember, the future looked like something worth walking toward. 6 months later, Renata stood at the edge of the Louisiana bayou and watched the sun sink toward the horizon. The water stretched out before her, endless and familiar, the same murky channels and twisted cypress trees that had defined her childhood. She had not been back here since her grandfather's funeral, had not been able to face the memories that lived in every ripple and shadow. But today was different. Today she had come to say goodbye. She reached in her pocket and pulled out the brass compass. It was warm from her body heat, the metal worn smooth by generations of hands. Her grandfather had carried it through Vietnam. Her great-grandfather had carried it through the Pacific. Now she had carried it through her own war, her own delta, her own darkness. The compass had never failed her, even when everything else had. She walked to the small dock where her grandfather's boat still sat, weathered but intact. The local neighbors had maintained it in his absence, some unspoken agreement to preserve what he had built. She climbed in and sat on the bench where she had spent countless hours as a child, learning to read the water, learning to wait, learning that patience was its own kind of weapon. The bayou sound surrounded her. Frogs singing their evening chorus, birds settling into the trees, the soft lap of water against the hull. It was peaceful in a way that the military had never been, quiet in a way that her life had never allowed. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. Nolan Hargrave, broken by expectations he could never meet, dying alone with a guilt that was never his to carry. She had written a letter to his mother last month, explaining what had really happened, what her son had really been. The woman had written back, thanking her through words blurred by tears. Closure was a strange gift, but it was still a gift. Declan Hargrave, consumed by rage and denial, destroying everything he touched in his quest to avoid his own reflection. His name had been stripped from the memorial walls. His legacy was a warning, not a tribute. Some part of Renata felt sorry for him, for the man he might have been if he had been brave enough to face the truth. But most of her felt nothing at all. Solomon Birch, quiet and steady, giving his life so that others could live. The Navy Cross hung in a place of honor at his widow's home. Renata had visited her twice now, sharing stories, sharing grief, sharing the particular bond of people who had loved the same good man. Birch would have hated the attention. He would have loved knowing that his sacrifice had mattered. Tomas Quiroga, still healing, still fighting, still determined to return to the teams despite everything. His hands were regaining function faster than the doctors had predicted. Stubbornness, Elena had called it. The Quiroga family specialty. Renata had a feeling he would be back in the water within a year. And Elena herself, blazing through flight school with the kind of intensity that made instructors nervous and peers envious. She sent Renata updates every week, long messages full of technical details and terrible jokes, and the unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. They all were. Finally, Renata opened her hand and looked at the compass one more time. The needle pointed north, steady and true, just as it always had. Her grandfather had told her once that a compass did not show you where to go. It only showed you where you were. The rest was up to you. She knew where she was now. She knew who she was. And she knew where she was going. The team leadership position had come through 2 weeks ago. Her own squad, her own operators, her own missions. Command had made it clear that they expected great things from her, that she was being watched, that her success or failure would shape opportunities for every woman who came after her. She had accepted without hesitation. She had been carrying that weight her entire career. At least now it was official. The sun touched the water, painting the bayou in shades of gold and orange. Renata stood up in the boat and faced the west, letting the light wash over her face. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "I made it." The words felt inadequate. Everything she wanted to say, everything she wanted him to know, could not fit into language. But she said it anyway, because some things needed to be spoken aloud, even if no one was listening. "I carried your compass through hell. I remembered what you taught me. Patience, precision, the willingness to wait for the shot that matters." She paused. "I wish you could have seen it. I wish you could have met the people who stood with me. I think you would have liked them." The bayou did not answer, but the frogs kept singing and the birds kept settling, and the water kept lapping against the hull. And somehow that felt like response enough. Renata sat back down and pulled out her phone. She had one more thing to do before she left. She dialed a number she had memorized weeks ago, but never called. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered. Birch residence. Mrs. Birch, this is Renata Vashon. A pause, then warmth flooding through the line. Renata, how are you, dear? I am good. I'm home, actually. Louisiana. I wanted to call and tell you something. Of course. Renata looked out at the water, at the compass in her hand, at the legacy she was carrying forward. I am naming my team after him. Team Birch. I got the approval yesterday. She swallowed hard. I wanted you to know that his name is going to mean something. That every mission we run, every life we save, it is going to be in his honor. The silence on the line stretched. When Mrs. Birch spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. He would have pretended to hate that, and secretly loved it. Renata laughed, the sound mixing with tears she did not bother to hide. I know. That is why I did it. They talked for a few more minutes, sharing memories, sharing plans, sharing the quiet understanding of people bound together by loss and love. When Renata finally hung up, the sun had slipped below the horizon and the first stars were appearing overhead. She pocketed the compass and started the boat's engine. The motor coughed once, then caught, rumbling to life with the familiar rhythm of her childhood. The bayou stretched out before her, dark and deep and full of secrets. But she was not afraid of it anymore. She had walked through worse darkness and come out the other side. She pointed the boat north and headed home. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength. Behind her, the delta faded into the night. Ahead of her, the future waited. And Petty Officer First Class Renata Vashon, team leader, sniper, survivor, was ready to meet it.